Today I'm doing a shower mixer installation. I'm going to replace the standard bath taps with this shower mixer tap set. I'm also going to do it entirely with compression fittings, so there will be no need for any soldering. So you should be able to complete the whole job just with spanners or even a set of pipe grips. The only specialist tools you will need, I think, are you will need a basin spanner and a decent pipe cutter, both of which are cheap and easy to get hold of. So let's get to it. First job is to remove the side panel from the bath so that we can get at the pipes below the taps. Mine just screws in 3 places along the bottom. Pull the bottom out and the top lip comes away from behind the bath. I've already removed the insulation from the tap end and folded back this piece. And in case you're wondering, yes, this insulation is here to help keep a nice warm bath warm. When we first moved into this house, we noticed we had drafts around the bottom of the bath, so I blocked up all the holes and insulated it. Next job is to turn the water supply off to both taps. Being hot and cold, they'll probably be on separate circuits, so do one circuit at a time so as not to get confused or mixed up. Turn off whatever stopcock stops the flow for the individual circuit, and then open all the taps on that circuit, both upstairs and downstairs. And the flow to the tap that we're going to be removing should stop. And in case there's any leakage through the stopcock, the downstairs taps being open will mean that that leakage should hopefully find its way downstairs rather than coming out of the pipes that we're going to be cutting here. And do the same for both circuits. Before you go rushing off to buy the fittings, make sure that you know which size fittings you need. And here's a prime example of why that is. Hot tap and is fed by a 22mm. The cold tap and is fed by a 15mm pipe. So I need different size fittings for my hot and cold. So it's worth having a look behind your bath at the pipes you've got before you go off buying your fittings. Unless of course you can purchase a range of fittings in different sizes on a sale or return basis. Also, what's not obvious on the video is that neither of my pipes supplying my taps have isolation valves. That's because this house was built in 1999, which was just before it became mandatory to fit isolation valves in tap pipes. So part of today's job is I'm going to include isolation valves in the water feed pipes to the new taps. If you're getting value from this video, don't forget to like it down by the title. The fittings I'm using today are these 2 compression type flexible tap connectors. Now, because I've got different size pipes on the 2 taps, I've bought a 22mm compression fitter for the hot tap, which has an integral isolation valve, and a 15mm compression fitting for the cold side. So this end fits to the pipes and this end fits directly to the tap. In this instance it's designated as a 3/4 inch tap connector, and it has a rubber washer in there that seals against that end surface there. Now we need to disconnect the water supply pipe from each tap. If you can get in there with a spanner or with pipe grips, great, but this is probably where your tap wrench will come in handy. Turn the jaws on the stem through 90 degrees, and then you open the jaws to fit round the nut, and then you'll have to work out which way to rotate the jaws to get them to grip the nut. You can just turn them to loosen the nut. With luck, once you've loosened the nut, you might be able to do it by hand. Otherwise, just reposition your tap wrench. And then use the same technique to undo the nut that's holding the tap to the bath. You might be able to get that loose by holding it in position and rotating the tap above. It's worth having a tap wrench to hand for this job. Again, this is another reason to assess the job before you go off buying stuff, because you can have a look at how much room you've got and assess whether or not you can get in there with a spanner or whether you're even going to need one of these. Repeat that process on the other tap. Now measure up your flexible pipe where it's going to fit to the taps so you can work out where to cut the original pipe. Not forgetting to leave sufficient pipe to fit inside the compression fitting at the end of the hose, and of course how far that screws onto the tap at the top end. Don't leave yourself too short with solid pipe. If anything, go cautious and cut the pipe further up than you think you might need. You can always cut more off, which is easier than trying to add some more back on. Now you can get your pipe cutter in here and cut the pipe where you marked it. Depending on what type of pipe cutter you've got, it might have an arrow. This type have an arrow on which shows you which way around to spin it to cut. If you're using a pipe cutter like this, then you would spin this clockwise as you're looking at it now. With this type of cutter, fit it over the pipe where the centre line lines up with the cut line, and all you need to do is keep turning it until the pipe is cut. Now I can fit my isolation valve and my flexible hose to this pipe with enough length for this to reach the tap. Not forgetting to remove the nut that came from the original tap fitting. With some medium grit emery or wire wool, give your copper pipe a clean down to make sure that there's no bits of solder or corrosion that could cause leaks. Ideally, I would have had a flexible hose that had an isolator built in, like this 22mm one. The store I was at didn't have 15mm with built-in isolators in stock, so I've had to get a separate isolator. So to fit that, I've cut a short piece of pipe off the long piece I just cut away from behind the bath so that I can fit the two together. Top tip, make sure to check that the isolation valve has or has not got a flow direction indicator, and make sure to observe that. And making sure that the pipe is pushed fully home, hold the valve in a pair of pipe grips, and then with a spanner or another pair of pipe grips, tighten down the compression nut. Do it fairly tight. Top tip, do not use a hacksaw to cut these pipes. A hacksaw produces a rough edge which you'll find it difficult to fit the compression fitting over, and it produces swarf, some of which will go down into the pipe and gets into your water supply. That may then get carried up through to your tap and may actually damage your tap workings. Now we can place our new tap unit on the bath. Use your tap wrench just to nip the nuts down. Now fit your flexible pipes to the taps. Tighten it down at the tap end sufficiently to put some compression into the rubber washer that's inside there. And top tip, if like me you're fitting isolation valves, be sure to orientate the valves such that you can access them at any later date to turn them on or off. I would suggest tightening down the tap end first, leaving the compression end loose, and then tightening the compression end afterwards with 2 spanners. That way you can be more sure of making sure that there's no kinks or twists in the pipe, and also you can make sure that this end goes on square and that the rubber washer inside sits square on the tap base to make sure there's no leak. When you're sure you've tightened all the water joints down sufficiently, go around the circuit, close all the taps that you previously opened, and turn back on the water supply. At the tap you were working on, allow some water to flow through to make sure all the air has been dispelled, and then look for any leaks or weep at any of the joints, and hopefully there will be none. Do that with both your hot and cold side. Don't forget as well to make sure that your hot and cold indicators are on the correct taps. Fit your shower riser to the wall, and hey presto, you've got a shower over the bath. If you got value from this video, please consider supporting the channel, and I shall see you next time.